let's kick things off. I have so many questions for you. Your career track is fascinating. And I think I want to start with you being the 19-year-old in Waseca, Minnesota, who goes to a police department and gets a part-time job. What what would you say to that 19-year-old today, given where you sit?
Wow, probably. Well, first of all, good afternoon, good morning, and wherever in the world you find yourselves. And thank you for having me, Julie. Gosh, what would I tell that 19-year-old kid? Boy, be careful what you wish for because you just may get it, I suppose. Yeah, at 19 years old, I grew up in a little town of 8,000 people in southern Minnesota. And I thought I was going to go off to school and go to law school and go on to do other things. But I got smitten with this idea of being a police officer because I was a security officer at my college. And one of the things that our director of security required us to do was ride with the St. Paul Police Department so that we would get this understanding of what happened in our neighborhood. And I had my first ride along at 19, and we were flying around with our hair on fire from call to call to call. And I thought, oh my gosh, they pay people to do this. And so I was a police reserve officer in my little hometown. And I spoke with the police chief about my career aspirations. And he said, I really need a part-time guy. Would you take the part-time test and become licensed as a part-time peace officer? And you can cover shifts on the weekends and the evenings. And so, ignorant that I was at 19, I said, well, of course I would do something like that. So in Minnesota, at 19 years old, you can't buy your own bullets. So my mother bought my bullets, the department gave me my gun, and I went on patrol. I had never been to the police academy. I hadn't had any formal police training. I had on-the-job training, and this is the mid 80s, and I was sent out alone on patrol. And I worked
Could
as
go
a part
wrong.
well, I did this from the time I was 19 till I was 21, till I was out of college. I did it for
Sure,
three
what could
years.
go wrong, GB?
Yeah,
Yeah,
nothing,
sounds
nothing,
great.
nothing could go wrong. So I worked part-time for the sheriff's office. I worked part-time for the police department. When I was done on patrol, I would go in as a 911 dispatcher, and I learned that side of the business as well. And then I finished my degree and went to the formal police academy before I started policing in a exurb of Minneapolis for my first 3.5 years.
Okay, and then you would go on to the FBI.
Yeah, I was a Minnesota state trooper after I was a city cop. So literally, I was a city cop, I was a deputy sheriff, I was a state trooper, and then I did 23 years in the FBI, retiring out of the FBI in 2019. So I've literally worked every level of law enforcement to include private security on the front end of that whole thing at my college. And then I went on to almost 4 years with the NFL as the director of international security before I landed in this job as the
Oh,
chief safety and security officer for the FIFA World Cup.
so let's take a step back to when you and I met when we're both working for the Naval Postgraduate School Center for Homeland Defense and Security. You and I are rolling through some highway in South Dakota talking about what our futures would look like. And this was pre-NFL.
It was.
And when you get the call, is it Kathy Lanier who's in charge of security, former Metropolitan Police Department chief? Is she the one who calls you directly and says, "Hey, GB, you want this job?"
Well, it was actually a little bit more interesting than that. She called me to talk about drones and drones as a threat. And Kathy has been brilliant in this space. She's prescient on the drone issue. But there were some things that I had a little bit more background on than she did. And so frequently we would call each other back and forth. We were classmates at the Naval Postgraduate School back in 2004. So we had been fast friends for 20 years. And she called me just to bounce a couple of things on drones off me. And I said, during that conversation, I said, gosh, if you have that opening for the international security director again, I've now retired from the FBI. I'd be really interested in taking a look at that. And she said, are you serious? And I said, of course, I'm very serious. She said, I'm getting ready to offer that position to somebody this afternoon. If you send me a resume and a cover letter, I'll run you through a process quickly. I won't tell the guys that are doing the interviews that there's a connection there. We'll just see where you net out on your merit. And that led to an interview that very afternoon, and that led to an offer. And within 2 weeks, I was hired and working for the NFL. Now, that was March of 2020. And so I showed up in New
Oof.
York and I got a new cell phone and I got a new computer. And 3 days in, they said, hey, why don't you go home till this little COVID thing blows over and we'll see you back here in a couple of weeks. And 14 months later was the first time I did an international trip in support of the NFL to do the security planning for the games overseas.
Well, before we even get now into to the next phase of your career, what would you say is the career leadership lesson you've learned from that conversation with Kathy Lanier that all it was you being the nice guy who you are, offering to help out a friend? You took the call.
I think there are a couple of things that I think are really fundamental to what I have learned through the course of my leadership journey. And one of those is network. Network matters. You really have to take the time to invest in network. And it's investing in that bank of trust that sometimes leads to a withdrawal down the line. So network matters. Being the honest broker really matters. There's another example in on Valentine's Day in 2008. I was the supervisory senior resident agent in Rockford, Illinois, when I got a call from the police chief at Northern Illinois University reporting an active shooter. And so I became the FBI's on-scene commander at that active shooter event where 7 people were killed and 20 were injured. And it was only a year after the Virginia Tech shooting. We didn't have all of the robust processes that we have now for active shooter response. So we were really shooting from the hip and literally driving at 100 miles an hour down the freeway to get down to the university. I've got my phone on to David Resch, who was another FBI supervisor who had been the supervisor of Virginia Tech. And I said, before I make some big mistakes here, what do I need to know going in the door? And so it was that network piece that again got me in the door. But when I got down there, the relationships between the NIU Police Department and the DeKalb City Police and the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office and the state police in Illinois were really strained. And it was the police chief at NIU that didn't connect well with the others in that same community. But I had a good relationship with everybody. I had invested time with the police chief at the university and with the city chief and with the sheriff and with the state police captain. So each of them independently came to me saying, could you do this? Could you do that? Because they wouldn't ask each other to do those things, which I found really interesting. And playing the role of the honest broker allowed us to solve that problem. So we put together different investigative lines of inquiry on the subject and his address and on the case at hand. And in each one of those lines of inquiry, I put a state police trooper, I put a deputy sheriff, I put a city police officer, and an NIU cop with an FBI agent. And so together collectively, we did this multi-jurisdictional approach in each line of inquiry that helped to knit that community a little bit closer together. Again, the role of the honest broker and leveraging the network is really what plays well for me.
What did David Rush say to you as you're going 100 miles an hour down the highway on your phone racing toward an active shooter?
Don't screw it up. I think was one of them. No, it was what I was asking him for is what were the things that he wished he had done differently in his approach, and he just gave me some sound guidance. And part of it was, don't overcommit the resources that you don't yet have. And I think that was very, very true. I had 10 agents for whom I was responsible in northwestern Illinois out of that Rockford office, but we had another 500 in Chicago. And I knew I could leverage all of those agents in Chicago once I understood what the problem set was going to be. So there's in crisis management, I avoid what is the action imperative. The action imperative is you got to do something now. You've got to act quickly and just jump right into the fray. Well, the way to temper that action imperative is to just take a step back and use some action criteria. And that is what you're contemplating doing really important right now? Is it the highest priority thing that you need to do right now? And if you act, are you following an ethical decision-making model? And for me, that ethical decision-making model is the book, The Bell and the Candle. So the book is it prohibited? What you're about to do, is it prohibited somewhere by law or statute? That's the book. That's the first litmus test. Is there somebody on your shoulder or some bell that goes off in your head that says, you may not want to do that again? So that's the bell. And the candle is how are your actions going to look if they're exposed to the light of day? Would it look good on the news? Would your mother approve? Right? So the book, The Bell and the Candle. So avoiding the action imperative by using action criteria and then doing that in an ethical way, following these models that I've learned through the course of my career.
Love that. So you are the director of international security for the NFL. You're living your best life. You're working hard, and you get a call from whom saying what?
Well, again, kind of a convoluted story, and it's a network-based story. So one of my colleagues at the NFL, with whom I traveled internationally as we were warming up these international markets, she was responsible for the host city management piece. And so she was out working with the host cities who were putting bids together to do the NFL draft or to do the Super Bowl. And she was courted by FIFA and pulled over saying, we need a director of host city management for FIFA. Would you come over and do this job? And they treated her extremely well. And there were some things that were going on at the NFL at the time where she just wasn't leveling up. She wasn't given the the responsibilities that were really commensurate with her skill set. And so FIFA came and said, "Hey, we've got this great opportunity. Would you take that on?" And after 8 years at the league, she decided she was going to take that move. Well, all of that happened outside of what I saw, which was a LinkedIn posting for the Chief Safety and Security Officer job that I currently sit in. And so I looked at that posting and I read it several times. It was over July 4th weekend in 2023. And I thought, man, this looks like a really interesting job. And it's the first posting ever that I went through and I checked every box. I went, gosh, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. I'm qualified for this position based on what I've done. And I didn't act on it and I didn't apply. And then I learned that my friend had gotten a job, and I called her a couple of weeks later and I said, "Gosh, you've taken this job at FIFA. Well, what led to that calculus? And why did you do that?" Because I saw this other posting and I didn't act on it. And we had a great conversation. And I said, "Well, gosh, now armed with what you've told me, I really wish I'd applied for that." And she said, "It's funny that you called me because yesterday I dropped your name to somebody here at FIFA and said, you should really go talk to this guy." So she said, "Send me a resume and I'll see what I can do." And she put the resume in front of the hiring folks here. And within a day, I had an interview, which led to an interview and another and another. And 4 interviews later, I was offered the job. And they said, 450 people put in for this job, and we'd like to award it to you. And I thought, well, gosh, that's ironic because I didn't even really apply. But here I landed. And for me, this is the culmination of a professional career of 35 years, where I started as an Eagle Scout. The motto, be prepared. At 18 years old, I was an Eagle Scout. At 19, I was a cop. And I was a city cop. I was a deputy sheriff. I was a state trooper. I was an FBI guy. I worked 4 years in the NFL, and the NFL taught me so much about major special event planning, and particularly in the international markets, where I had some great colleagues who were former Metropolitan Police in London and former officers in Germany and in Mexico City who were colleagues of mine. And I learned so much about this space. And the irony was, when I went to international stadiums in England and in Germany and in Mexico City, I first sought to understand how they policed international soccer so I could reverse engineer their policing plans to accommodate the American football experience. And so, because I took time to learn what they were doing and then reverse engineered it, gosh, 4 years later, I found myself in American football stadiums reverse engineering the NFL problems for international football. So it really has been a synergistic and really interesting career journey for me. And I just feel extremely pleased and honored to be in the position that I'm in.
People who have joined us on JPCU, on this online university platform, we have everyone from college students studying crisis communications up to leaders of government agencies, city managers, town managers, etc. They may not all be soccer fans. Can you put into a paragraph the magnitude of FIFA World Cup 2026?
In a sentence, this
Maybe
is the
two.
largest sporting event in the history of the world. Full stop. That is the magnitude of this event. So we have 48 teams participating, the largest field ever, in 104 games in matches, in 16 cities, in 3 nations. But that belies the fact that we have more than 600 sites that are a part of what it is we're trying to do, because we have team base camps that are outside of the host cities, well outside the host cities. In fact, in some cases, they're outside of the states that are hosting. So we have about 30 states that are implicated some way or another in just the base camps or the teams, either accommodations or training sites or the stadiums themselves. So more than 600 sites to have to accommodate. That's transportation and escorts of all of these teams and of the referees and staff and arriving delegations from host nation or from participating member associations, all of them moving around over the course of this 39 days. So 104 matches in 39 days. That means we're doing sometimes 4 and 6 matches a day across all of North America. That's a huge logistics challenge.
The math is really just, it seems impossible to manage. You have a team of 200, 15 direct reports, and I'm picturing your office in Miami that's nothing but a gigantic whiteboard with all of these numbers and security plans. Are you essentially operating the way the Secret Service would an advanced team before the President of the United States goes overseas? Is it anything like that?
There are tidbits of that are drawn into what our model, our operating model looks like. So when I took this job on, there were 2 of us. There was one guy who had worked 4 World Cups. He is an engineer. He's a former police officer. He's an architect. He's one of the most brilliant people in this space I've ever worked with, and he's a great colleague and friend. But it was two of us. And we had a whiteboard on the wall, and we said, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? What organizational structures are going to be used here? What can we look at historically that's worked that we can use as models? And what models are we going to test, validate, and perhaps change to pull this thing off? And so I have some of that has been informed by the way the Secret Service does planning for NSSEs, which are National Special Security Events, which is a subcommittee structure that has an executive committee on the top and a number of different subcommittees that work on different things. But that was just one model we looked at. We looked at the way the NFL is structured. And we looked at the way some international organizations are structured. And ultimately, we landed on a hybrid model that really served us very, very well. So what I did in our organizational model here is we hired an executive director for safety and security in Canada and one in Mexico. The guy in Canada, 35 years with the Toronto Police Service. He's an absolutely wonderful guy, and he's very well connected to the Canadian law enforcement and government authorities. In Mexico, we hired the guy who's the former #2 for the Mexican national intelligence apparatus. So he knows everyone in the Mexican government and how a lot of their government agencies work together, from the local level all the way up to the federal level. In the United States, the executive director is my partner, that #2 guy that was here with me. Andre Reis is his name, the Brazilian guy, but he's been in 4 World Cups. He's forgotten more about World Cup security than I'll ever know. And then we split out the United States because it's so large in geographic areas. The West Coast consists of Seattle, San Francisco Bay Area, and LA. The middle part of the country, central region, is Kansas City, Houston, and Dallas. The Northeast region we've carved out with Boston, New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, but we've also added Atlanta to that because there's a couple of reasons for that. And then Miami stands alone with its own regional director. And Miami is alone because most of our team base camps are down in South Florida, and we have a stadium in South Florida, and our headquarters is in South Florida. So I have 4 regional directors across the United States, and then the Canada and Mexico folks. Each of them have senior managers at the stadiums and in the non-competition sites. So we're breaking this down geographically. And then functionally, we put directors in charge of intelligence and command and control. That touches every piece of the footprint. A director of safety and emergency preparedness, again, touching every element in the footprint. A director of medical administration with a player health and safety piece. A director of access management and accreditation. So we have geographic leads and we have functional leads that cross-cut them. That helps us shrink the problem down to a manageable level. And then as we engaged with our host cities, we went out and we said the same question that you asked me. Do you follow a Secret Service model? What do you do? When you do special event planning in your community, how do you do it? And in conversations with each host city and host nation, we identified 18 areas of planning focus that were common to each one of those host cities and host nations. Those 18 areas of planning focus had a little bit of disconnect in each of them. So we set about setting a common definition for each of the 18 areas of focus, and then 6 or 8 strategic objectives that each host city agreed to be able to deliver in each one of those 18 areas of planning focus. All of those had the voice of the host cities and the host nations in them because that's the construct that they follow. So what resulted was 18 areas of planning focus with a common definition for each, 6 to 8 strategic objectives against which each host city could plan. And that became our safety and security concept. That was the what needed to be delivered. And everybody could agree to deliver that in a consistent way. The how they're going to deliver is up to each host city. That's what's unique about each of the host cities. But the what, the baseline, the foundation, the structure that we need to have was common to all 16 host cities. So now we have a framework around which we can do the plans. And that's where we are now.
So GB, I think people who are watching this and listening to you, I'm doing this. I'm thinking, I thought I was having a really tough March. There's a lot of pressure. I cannot wrap my head around what time of day you get up, how you approach. I can't imagine the problems that you have to navigate on a daily basis. Then the pressure of the clock's ticking, we're getting close to these games. On a personal level, how do you keep going? Are you on some magical diet? Are you waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get it all done? Are you working out like crazy? Have you stopped working out? Walk me through the guy I know and how you tackle this kind of pressure.
You know, There's a variety of strategies. Probably the best strategy I use is my anchor that I've had forever and ever. And I'll celebrate 33 years with my wife in April. And
She's
she is
awesome.
also in policing. She's a police chief. She and I met while working as EMTs on an ambulance. So service delivery is kind of baked into our ethos. It's who we are. And she gets me and I get her. And so I can oftentimes just kind of decompress and take care of the things that I need to get myself centered again. One time when I was working for the NFL, I was getting really frustrated because it was the summer of 2020 and social justice issues were front and center, and there were distractions, I thought, from some of what we were trying to do. Sport to me is supposed to be escapism. It shouldn't be this vehicle for politics. It should be above all of that. And some of this was devolving, and it happened not just in the NFL, but of course it was happening all over the country. And Leanne said something to me that just really resonated. She said, "Your job is to keep people safe." That's it. It's that simple. Forget about the politics, forget about who the president is, forget about, who your boss is. Your job is to keep people safe. And that harkened back to a scholarship application I had back as a 19-year-old kid. And I asked my sheriff to write an endorsement for me for a scholarship from the National Sheriff's Association. And this guy was not a man of many words. And literally his letter of endorsement for me was, GB likes to fight crime and help people. That's it. So it's that simplistic. And so it's those things that just keep me anchored again. What we're doing is really remarkable. And it is the coolest job I've ever had because we went with a blank whiteboard into producing a safety and security apparatus for the greatest sporting event in the history of the world. Yeah, you can let the pressure get to you, or you can anchor yourself on the crisis management history, experience, the leadership experience, the opportunities that have been presented to me through the course of my life, and build an exceptional team that can help you deliver across all of the obligations that you have. And that's what I've opted for, is we have an exceptional team that's focused on what they are best at. And I have best in class planners that have decided to join this team. And I'm so pleased and so honored to be in a position where I'm responsible to give them the resources that are necessary for them to optimize what it is they're doing. But we've got some incredibly talented people in the stadium space, in the non-competition space, in the intelligence space, the medical and the emergency preparedness space. It's just really, really a neat opportunity. So is there stress and pressure? Of course there is. But we can manage that through that network of networks that we've talked about before, by leveraging relationships and by diving into the task at hand.
How are global politics today affecting your plans to keep everybody safe? There's a lot going on in the world.
Yeah, there really is. It has an influence on everything that we do because it's the backstop or the background of everything it is we're doing. Remember, these are 48 participating member associations. That's 48 different countries that are represented here. That's 48 different cultures and team histories and geopolitical histories that they're bringing here. It may not even be what's happening today. It's what's happened politically in history between two nations that could manifest at the World Cup. So all of those things have to be considered. So when we talk about how that translates to safety and security, much of what we do is intelligence led and operationally then focused. So we put together an intelligence apparatus led by a woman who put the Fusion Center together out at Las Vegas Metro Police Department. She's got tons of operational experience, but she's got really good intelligence instincts and experience as well. And then we've built an intel team around her that are really diving into these geopolitical issues so that we can understand the threat and the context of the World Cup in the face of that threat, both what's happening now and what's happened historically. And one of the things that's really interesting and different to me about the way we've approached this is when we set up the intelligence apparatus, it was very, very clear to the intel team, we are not going to be intel analysts for all of the threats that are out there. We don't need to focus on counterterrorism and on cyber and transnational criminal threats, human trafficking, all of those things, because there are public sector partners focused on those threats. What we need to focus on is soccer intelligence. Where do we add value to the intel community? Nobody understands soccer like FIFA does. So we've leveraged our relationships with the 211 member associations and the 6 confederations. We've looked at all of FIFA's holdings on historical matchups between the teams, and we have really focused on team culture, fan culture, these historic matchups, everything that touches that soccer culture. That's where we add value. So we can narrowly scope our intel holdings down to what is adding value to the private sector and the public sector with our knowledge and understanding of soccer. What's coming to each of the host cities in the context of soccer that then adds value to the other things that they're also looking for in terms of geopolitical threat, counterterrorism, counterintelligence, cyber, weapons of mass destruction, all of that. But our focus is soccer.
You recently did something for which you got media coverage, and I have no doubt there are people on this webinar who have done the same thing. Tabletops. They are such a basic tenet of security, whether you're at a small municipal police department or you're getting ready for a World Cup. One, how did you secure media coverage about a tabletop? And two, what did you yield as a result of that 2-day event?
So I think you're probably talking about the NORTHCOM event that was hosted in Colorado Springs by the United States Northern Command of the White House Task Force. That was more than a tabletop. That was really a series of really focused discussions that had to do with each of the host cities in the United States. Canada was also there because of the relationship between NORTHCOM and NORAD, North American Air Defense, and the host cities, and of course the White House Task Force. That one was noteworthy and kind of got its own media attention because of the level of folks that were in that discussion. We did have a really good series of conversations about contingency planning, weather planning. So in that sense, the second day was more of a tabletop focus. But I cannot overstate or emphasize too strongly the value of collaborative training and conversation like that occurs at a tabletop exercise. They're very affordable to put on. You put everybody in the same room and you talk through scenarios as if you're in the moment. I am a master exercise practitioner from FEMA. I am that position because I believe in the value of tabletop exercises, and I facilitate those on a regular basis. It is so important to put people in the moment and then give them these injects that will make them think differently and challenge them in a safe environment. And you have to be very clear at the outset that, look, this isn't a gotcha game, and this isn't about making you look bad. You have to let your defenses down a little bit and truly understand this is a collaborative output that is coming from here. This isn't about what FIFA is doing or what XYZ police department bring to the table. It's about synergy and what we do together. It's about who is in the best position to make the best decisions with the best information at this particular time. Frequently, it's not who's in charge, but who's in charge of what and when, because that changes. And in a unified command model, you may have the police chief and the fire chief and the EMS chief and the emergency manager and a public health person and a private sector person like FEMA or FIFA rather, all at the same table. Well, they all have equal standing until an issue comes up that's a law enforcement centric issue. And then the chair of that group becomes the police chief. If it's a fire issue, the chair becomes the fire chief, right? But you have to have these trustful relationships before you can get to that point where you can crosstalk. And those trustful relationships only develop through repetition and through familiarity with each other. And that's the value of the tabletop exercise. Get to know each other before the incident. When we do our planning, and I talk to rookie planners and people that are new in this space quite often, and sometimes what I hear from them is they're really good about their plans, but their plans are focused on guards, gates, and guns. They're focused on how they're going to control or contain their event. And our planning is not guards, gates, and guns alone. Our planning is, yes, what are the guards, gates, and guns, but what happens when they fail? Because inevitably one or more of those things will fail. And if your guards, gates, and guns fail, do you have the resources, responders, and relationships that are key to solving whatever the problem is? And the problem can be defined as a hostile vehicle attack, as an active shooter, as a natural disaster or a hazardous weather event. It could be anything. It doesn't matter what the impact is or what the input is. What matters is, do you have the resources, relationships, and responders to solve that problem, whatever it is? And so that's the area of focus. And then again, tabletops are the gateway to building the resources and the responders and the relationships that are essential to solve those problems.
Before we started building crisis communications customized tabletops, I had been in them. I'm sure Christopher, as a chief of police, our VP, I'm sure he's been through a million tabletops. And my experience before being with JPC was that tabletops were largely operationally focused with a pinch of communications. And as a communications professional attending those events, I was frustrated because communications isn't just a pinch of the big picture. In some cases, depending on how your event plays out, the PR piece is enormous. So when you all did that, where did crisis communications fit into the mix?
And now a word from our sponsor. Julie Parker Communications is your go-to for all crisis communications. Now, Julie did not put me up to that, but seriously, this is a hugely, hugely important piece of your planning. Your planning has to go beyond just the operational piece. It's what happens afterwards. And one of the things that I talk a lot about is victim-centered planning. So beyond the resources, relationships, and responders, you will be judged in the moment, regardless of what happens, by the way you treat your victims and the way you connect with them. Do you have family unification centers or family assistance centers baked into your plan? Do you have crisis communications baked into your plan? For us, crisis communications includes not just pre-scripted messaging or holding statements, but it also is multilingual communication in multiple platforms. It's making sure that you have the channels to meet people where they stand, not just where you want to communicate from. So it's like having a crisis web page in standby mode so that when things devolve to crisis, you flip your web page to your frequently asked questions, to the things that have resources there for your victims already listed out on your crisis web page. It's connecting with people in pre-scripted WhatsApp channels or Signal channels or Teams channels. It's making sure that you can leverage and understand who's responsible for putting messages on signboards, highway message boards. Can you connect with your broadcast partners? Can you connect with your social media channels? It's understanding the entire ecosystem of communication in advance and planning who's going to do what, how are you going to communicate that, through what channels, and who accesses those channels on your behalf. So this is a really complex problem because we have many, many different emergency operations centers, joint operations centers, intel operations centers, multi-agency coordination centers, special event command centers, many of which have joint information centers or JICs. Understanding that ecosystem alone, where are the JICs? Who are the spokespeople? Who are the releasing authorities for the emergency messages that go through each of those spokespeople? And can we map all of that out? So we're having great conversation about that. Again, it's not just who's in charge, but who's in charge of what. And what's critically important to me in a program this massive is having a single message with multiple messengers. So whatever your emergency message is, we have to agree that the release authority, for instance, if it's a public safety message, the police chief is going to be the release authority on a public safety matter. It's not FIFA, even though it's a FIFA event. It's the police chief. And FIFA Communications understands that police chief's message can be propagated across all of the FIFA channels without any changes to it because it's a single message. And I've been very clear to our comms team, you can't put even an additional word in there. You have to have exactly the same message the police chief wants out. Now, if it's a FIFA message, we're talking about a game delay or a cancellation, then we're the release authority. And we're asking public safety partners to message our message through their communications channels, again, without putting their own spin on it. Just put the message out. So one message, multiple messengers. Mapping that ecosystem can be kind of daunting sometimes.
Few questions. One, what if you find, and this could happen, a law enforcement leader is like, I don't want to touch this. This is going to be ugly. FIFA, you do it. That's one question. And then my second question, you mentioned Signal, which is a private app. The mayor of New York City, the new mayor, is dealing with some bad publicity regarding using the Signal app to communicate, which means that those records, their government records, can't be retained, which side note, that's why we work with Genesis Evertel as one of our strategic partners. So one, FIFA as a private company can use whatever methods it wants to communicate. What would you say to government entities about trying to communicate with records that have to be saved, but about sensitive topics like preparing for a World Cup?
Yeah, that is one of our challenges right now. Actually, there are a number of different challenges in the communication space. One of them is how do we share information, planning information with partners and shield that from sunshine laws or Freedom of Information Act requests? We had a bad experience very recently where we put a permit application in the city of Seattle, and that permit application had to have a number of security elements that went along with it. And within a week or so, The newspaper is publishing the number of guards and the number of gates and the emergency blowout gates that wouldn't be staffed, that were part of the plan,
Mm,
some of which we've had to rejigger, of course. But that freedom of information is really challenging when that's out there. I believe in transparency and I believe in the right of the public to
same.
know, but that does not extend to safety and security information that is operationally sensitive. So we have to kind of split those two things. Now, we do have a lot of conversations with our public sector partners, some of whom have brought that up about Signal. So we agree, okay, that's not an app that is useful to any of us. So we're not going to operate in this environment using Signal. And we will operate in those things that are a bit more mainstream and that are a bit more acceptable. Because we do understand that there are some public limitations about that limit, the retention of information and things like that, that certainly we're going to be sensitive to. And we don't make decisions in a vacuum or in isolation. This is a collective enterprise. And so we have to meet in the middle to talk about what really works as the best tool for whatever the job is.
Because those records
But,
need to be compliant. Okay,
yeah,
let's go
that's right.
back to,
And now
let's
the
say, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on your public safety person who doesn't want to be the spokesperson,
Yes.
right? So the way that we are doing incident management for the FIFA World Cup is very much a divested decision-making model. So it's not about bringing information back to the Tournament Operations Center in Miami for us to make big pontificating decisions and then force that out to everyone. The best information in real time, the best intelligence, and the optics of what's happening on the ground exist in the stadiums and in the hotels and the training sites out in those local areas. I don't know that we will find a time where there is a public safety partner that's out there that is not going to be willing to talk about it. Because if it's not the local police chief, it'll be the sheriff or it'll be the federal coordination team who is assigned to that particular market. So if it's a public safety message to go out, that is not FIFA's space. And so we should not be accepting a responsibility to speak on behalf of public safety when it's a public safety message. That will be handled by the public safety authority. And if the police chief doesn't want to say it, well, then maybe the mayor needs to say it. Maybe the sheriff needs to say it. Maybe the state police captain needs to say it, right? If it's public safety, it belongs in public safety. If it's a private message, we'll message that out through our communications teams, all of whom are embedded in the host cities for those operations that occur in the stadiums.
If I'm a communicator in Houston, Dallas, or Kansas City, in the center of the country, how do I start getting ready? Let's say I work at a county police department. How do I start getting ready for FIFA World Cup coming to my city? Do you all reach out to the local jurisdictions and say, "Hey, here's our comms team. You two should talk." How does that play out?
Yeah, very much so. When I identified those 18 areas of planning focus that we talked about before, one of those is public affairs, communications, and community impact. So that became a working group that had representatives from each of the host cities on it. That working group is the one that validated that common definition and those strategic objectives that we identified as that pillar within our overall safety and security concept. From that working group, then we started to branch out. Each one of the host cities has a safety and security lead that works for the host city committee. In some cases, that's a retired police official. In some cases, it's just a member of the LLC who's got some sort of background in communications or in public affairs or in our case, safety and security. So it's our expectation that they know their stakeholders locally. So when those working groups need to expand and we start talking about operations in their host city, it's that safety and security lead for the host city that should be reaching to the local police, the local sheriff's office, to the local state police barrack, and bring those people into the conversation. So the planning very much happens at a local level as well as at a national level. So we're putting the information out centrally on what we want to accomplish in this foundational document, the safety and security concept, but that's operationalized locally by the stakeholders that are created locally. And then that feeds back into the central apparatus so that we can do a review for consistency from one community to the next. So I talked about those functional responsibilities and the geographic responsibilities. What we learned from the Club World Cup was that geography wasn't quite consistent enough. Even though we had regular meetings with our regional directors, their regions tended to do things a little bit differently. So in the lead up to the World Cup, I took one regional director for all stadiums. And even though that regional director had a geographic responsibility, I asked him to take a look at every stadium plan across all 16 stadiums for consistency. Not to change them, just identify where the differences were so that we can reconcile that inconsistency. We did the same thing with the training sites and the hotels. had another regional director from another region cross-cut every training site and every hotel to look for consistency in the way we're delivering the safety and security concept. And in this way, we can cement this notion that we are one World Cup. We're not 16 individual World Cups that are somehow banded together with baling wire, right? It's one World Cup that has 16 very distinct flavors with each of the 16 host cities. But at the end of the day, it's FIFA that has the responsibility for pulling these 16 cities together. Because again, importantly, it's across three host nations. There's no one federal government, like the Secret Service model that you talk about, Julie. There's no one federal government that has oversight of delivery of the tournament. So we have to play the role of the honest broker as FIFA, and we have to ensure consistency in delivery from each of the three federal governments, as well as those 16 host cities, which is challenging. And again, we're a private company. We don't have the ability to tell federal governments or city governments what to do or how to do it. But what we're trying to do is leverage this role by building relationships and playing the role of the honest broker to say, we do have some experience in this space. We know soccer better than anybody. We know our fan bases and our culture and our client groups better than anybody. So we have a bit to offer in this space.
Complex being Miami based, US based, and needing to work closely with the governments in Canada and Mexico right now.
So again, we've kind of controlled for this in the way we put our organizational structure together. FIFA US, the FWC 2026 US Incorporated, is a US-based company that I work for. So FIFA Zurich, FIFA is headquarters in Zurich, but FIFA established different legal entities in the United States, Canada, and Mexico just for the delivery of the World Cup. So when we're signing contracts and when we're entering into RFP relationships with vendors, all of those things are done with the local laws in mind. So we're informed by FIFA Zurich and what their requirements are writ large, but we're independent. We're wholly owned subsidiaries, basically, that deliver the World Cup. And this is the first time ever FIFA's taken this approach. Typically, what happens in a FIFA World Cup is a host nation will bid for the right to manage the World Cup. That's awarded by FIFA. And then FIFA sets the requirements that are delivered by that local organizing committee that is composed of the host nation working groups. For the first time ever, FIFA said, you know what? There's better consistency if FIFA is also that organizing committee. So FIFA established these independent entities, the wholly owned subsidiaries in Canada, US, and Mexico, all of whom really are pulled together under the umbrella of the group in the United States, our overall headquarters, to make sure that what we're delivering is consistent. It is focused on the three different nations, and it's focused on the delivery of the tournament itself. So it's an interesting organizational structure. It's never been tried before. So we've got a few lessons learned even in the organizational structure that way. But FIFA Zurich has this 100 years of doing the World Cup. So requirements born of that 100 years of experience, but adapted to the local laws, the local customs, the local organizational structures of the US, Canada, and Mexico. Again, in that consistency sort of approach that we are weaving together in North America.
You're starting to get some questions in the chat, and I would encourage others to put them in there. I want to ask you in a moment, GB, about heads of state coming to visit and how that changes the complexity of an already complex security event. But a question from Rebecca Smith is, after years of preparation for an event at this scale, what coordination factors require the most leadership attention once operations begin?
Wow. All of them, really. I mean, there's a lot of coordination that happens when the operations begin. Again, what training is hugely important to us. So we have to, first, we're building out the plans. So the host cities all have an obligation to put together their overall safety and security plan. FIFA has an obligation to put together tactical plans at the place where we have operations. And that's things like the stadium and the venue-specific training sites and hotels. Each of those things are coordinated locally by in FIFA's case, we have a venue operations director who's accountable for everything that happens at the stadium, and a host city director that is over all of the non-competition sites. So the stadium is considered the competition site. Anything else outside the stadium, we term a non-competition site. That's hotels and airports and training sites and all of that. So there's a host city director and a venue operations director in every host city. So those are the FIFA leads that then will communicate with the mayor's office or the police department or whatever locally. They're the action officers, if you will, for FIFA. They are accountable back to our tournament operation headquarters in Miami, where all of our chiefs sit. So, chief safety and security officer, the chief of business operations and strategy, chief tournament officer, chief financial officer, all those chiefs back here that are managing the overall tournament. So, again, public safety emergencies are divested. They're handled in the locations where those instances are happening. But tournament operations, those bigger decisions about do we go on, do we move a match, do we cancel a match, do we postpone, those are the things that come back to here. So the coordination piece is ongoing, but it happens on multiple levels, all the way down to the delivery on the side of the pitch.
Not getting into specifics, but how does it change your planning when on top of everything that you're managing with 6 billion people watching, when you add in multiple, not just one, but multiple heads of state coming to visit a game? I can't imagine the number of VIPs in addition to heads of state coming to watch a match. What changes? Are you bringing in magical additional security officers from somewhere? How do you ramp up?
No, it doesn't change anything because it's part of our plan. Those are one of our critical client groups. So VIPs, so presidents of member associations. Interesting little tidbit here. FIFA has 211 member associations. Think of them like countries that have soccer programs. There's only 195 recognized countries in the United Nations. So FIFA has more member associations than the UN has countries that are recognized. So all of these presidents of member associations are folks that are very influential. They're certainly very influential in the FIFA space because they're the ones that are accountable and responsible to elect the FIFA president. Right. So we have different groups we term as client groups. It's teams, it's referees, it's staff, it's VIPs and dignitaries. Each of them have lines of planning to ensure that we can accommodate them when we're putting on our tournament. So everything is planned for. We have a guest operations program. We have a government relations program. When we talk about heads of state or internationally protected persons, those people come into our client group through our government relations or our guest operations portal. And we have somebody who is a director of protective security operations, one of the folks that I built into our organizational structure, who's responsible to work with the gov folks and the guest operations folks to make sure that that head of state or that ministerial level person who is an internationally protected person who travels with their own security entourage has the tools and the information that are necessary to get them safely into our stadium and to get them to their seats and then get them away from the stadium again. People who arrive who are private sector folks who may have a security entourage, we have different controls around that. We want to control who's got weapons inside the stadium and know who they are. If they're internationally protected persons who are under escort by a law enforcement officer who's on duty and in their jurisdiction, then of course they're allowed to come into the stadium for purposes of what they're doing. We just want to know who they are and where they are so that we can avoid any issues that might happen with that. If it's a privately protected person who comes with a security entourage, they're not allowed to bring armed security into the stadium with them. So they can bring an escort in with them, but they're not armed. If they are particularly under threat, we'll assign an on-duty law enforcement officer to them so that while they're in the stadium, they've got somebody who's with them who is armed. But that's somebody who's then known to us and part of the plan. So when VIPs and dignitaries show up, it's not a change in our plan. It's not an additional burden. It's something that's baked into what we do because we consider that they are coming. They are one of our constituent groups, and that's up to and including heads of state. We managed that really, really effectively with the Secret Service during the Club World Cup final last summer, where President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump were in-house with the FIFA president at the MetLife Stadium for the final.
If you're a soccer fan and you manage to snag one of these pricey tickets, $2,000 to $3,000 a ticket, and you're there, what do you want fans to know? What do you want them to download? What do you want fans who can't get in, but they're at a nearby base camp bar? What should people, I know you're going to say something. You're a former FBI guy, but what should people practically be doing? Should they download certain apps? What are they looking for? What do what does suspicious mean?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, see something, say something is a DHS tagline, not an FBI tagline.
Sorry, my bad.
But
My
we
bad.
do subscribe. No, we do absolutely subscribe to it. It is really important. What we try to do is maintain and enhance situational awareness wherever we can. What I want people to take away from the World Cup is that this is a sporting event, first and foremost, that has a little bit of a security layer to it. It's not a security event with an incidental soccer match, right? That's hugely important to me. And so the way we're approaching this is our responsibilities are safety, security, and service. And that service component is hugely important because without customer service and a focus on customer service, you're not going to have the safety and security levels that you need. If your security officers that are the first ones encountered by people who are approaching the stadium have a smile on their face and they're welcoming people in and they're bringing them to the celebration that is the World Cup, you have a decidedly different experience than if you've got somebody there with a dour look on their face and crossed arms and a backwards baseball cap and sunglasses, right? And so service is baked into everything we do. It's drilled in at our training. It's shared with our public safety partners. And it's hugely important to not just what's happening at the stadium, but to what's happening in those bars and restaurants as well. We are not looking out for marauding bands of thugs that are going to come to our cities and disrupt the place. What we're doing is we're enabling this global celebration of football and a celebration of unity around this tournament that we need to be enablers for. And that's what the safety and security service components are all about. So be aware of what's happening around you. Download the City app or the FIFA app rather, download the WhatsApp group for the city that you're traveling to because you're getting a lot of great information at both of those locations. But more than anything, just be aware of your surroundings. When it comes to the stadium, bring your passion, not your pyro. That's one of my favorite taglines, right? So we're going to be screening people as they come into the stadium. And the reason for that is to keep people safe. It's not to diminish this culture of pyrotechnics that oftentimes happens in international football. It doesn't happen because it's endorsed. There is no safe pyrotechnic of any kind in any confined space or in a stadium. So that is not encouraged behavior. In fact, we'll be stopping that at the door. So bring your passion, not your pyro. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Communicate those things that make you feel uncomfortable. If your spidey sense is tingling, we want to hear about it, and we will have the resources to be able to act on that.
Were you a football FUTBOL fan before FIFA, and were you a football FOOTBALL fan before the NFL? And now are you both?
You know, I have grown into both, but I wasn't either before I got here. I had a swimmer and volleyball players in my household. So I was paying attention to high school sports as really my avocation. I didn't really have much time on a Sunday afternoon to be paying attention to football. I had precious little time with my kids. So on the weekends, I tried to do things with my kids and not sit on the couch and watch football. So I never really grew into that. I was a hockey player when I grew up.
Of
So Team
course.
USA thrilled the heck out of me this year. I love to see that. But I learned a lot about NFL football during my time with the NFL. And I used to tell folks that I worked with overseas who were huge football with the
Excuse
FUTBOL,
me?
the
Yeah.
FUTBOL
Thank you. Thank you.
football fans. I used to tell them that it would befuddled me because I would be at these stadiums and I would turn my back and walk away into the concourse away from the stadium bowl, and I would hear cheers erupting. And I thought, I've missed the goal, the one goal of that game. And so I'd turn back around and go in. Well, nobody had scored. It's just the ball was going the other way. And that's what football fans cheer for. And that was foreign to me. But I have grown to certainly appreciate it and even love it. Folks call it, it's been known a long time as the beautiful game. And it really is a testament to the athleticism of the athletes that are down there. I mean, anybody who runs for 45 minutes straight has got to be an incredible athlete. And so just the celebration of culture and people and the athleticism of some of these guys, certainly in both the NFL and in FIFA, is exceptional.
Brad Parker suckered me into being a Cowboys fan about 20 years ago, and I haven't been doing a lot of cheering since. We've got a question from Robert in Mesa, Arizona. GB, curious, are there any national coordination meetings for team base camp host cities, similar to the coordination groups that you mentioned for the match host cities?
There are not any national coordination groups. So we're so far along in the planning right now that the value really comes in the local integrations with our safety and security senior managers, our team-based camp coordinators, and the folks that are assigned as team security liaison officers or TSLOs. They're the ones that are going to be reaching out to each of the team-based camp host cities and really working closely together with them to put their plans over the line. The national planning were really for strategic issues and looking at operationally how we were going to knit together these bigger pieces. But we're so close to the tournament now with kickoff just 3 months away that trying to get that national level coordination is just really going to be an invasive issue for us. So we're really focused, hyper focused, in fact, on trying to dive into those local groups. And Robert, I happen to know from my time working the Super Bowl in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area, and he's a very skilled emergency manager who I have no doubt is going to be able to knit together his local teams to put things together. So good luck, Robert.
Who have you met athlete-wise that really stands out to you?
That's a great question. And you're probably going to be disappointed in the answer because even though I work in sport and I've worked for the NFL and for now FIFA, I tend to be unimpressed by athletes overall. The people that really matter to me are, quite frankly, public safety officials and government officials that are the ones that are moving rocks out of the way to be able to create these great celebrations for people. And the athletes are important, of course, to the game and to the delivery of what it is, the spectacle, right? But I'm not really enamored by them. So when I come across them, it's like, hey, okay, interesting guy, but I'm not really smitten with them. So it's an interesting question for me, and I don't know. Maybe I've just offended everybody in the NFL and in FIFA, but I'm not to the point where I'm super impressed by them. I get a bigger charge, quite frankly, out of walking the halls of Congress, and this may turn a bunch of people off also, but just because of what that stands for and what democracy is, and what the people that are responsible for helping overall with major planning events and funding this, and I don't want to talk about individual politics. That's not what it's about. It's about the institutions that I get a bigger charge out of, the government pieces, quite frankly, than I do the sporting pieces.
Got 3 months to go. In the last 30 seconds, how will you mentally prepare for what's ahead? 30 seconds.
I will get recentered in the course of the next 2 weeks before we go on complete lockdown. And that recentering is just rekindling the connections with family members and with friends and folks that I'm not going to see for a couple of months because we're going to be on a flat out sprint from the 6th of April until the delivery of the tournament on the 19th of July. We're on a lockdown. There's no leave. There is no days off. We are in tournament mode. So I'll recharge by pulling together the people that are closest to me, drawing energy in from each one of them so that I'm charged up for the next 90 days that will follow. And
We
really
all
very much
wish
looking forward.
you the absolute best. Nothing but safety and healthy players and fans. GB Jones, Chief Safety and Security Officer for FIFA World Cup 2026. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all of your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, Julie.
Take care.